G'day guys and welcome. My name is Michael and I'm the DeadAussieGamer, and welcome to Dead Aussie Review, where I review tabletop role-playing games that I have had the pleasure of playing and GMing in my time as a professional game master and role player. Today we're going to be taking a look at probably my favorite non-diced role-playing game, Through the Breach by Weird Games. Now, Through the Breach is a tabletop role-playing game that is actually a sister game to the very popular Wargame Malifaux by the same company. It is set in the early 1900s at the height of the Industrial Revolution, but instead of steam and coal fueling that revolution, it is instead this magical mineral known as soulstones that are harvested from a nightmare realm adjacent to Earth known as Malifaux. There are pioneers, criminals, and all kinds of people who have gone through the breach and into Malifaux in order to carve a new life for themselves, and that is the role that you play as members of the Fated. Now, this review is not going to be a breakdown of everything within the pages of the core rulebook, nor is it going to be a step-by-step tutorial on how to build characters or play. There is going to be videos about that later at some point or another. Check the description below, because if I do them, that's where I'll put them. This is going to be a review on what I thought of the game, how I first got introduced into it, and whether or not it might be the game for you. So sit back, strap yourselves in as we head through the breach and discuss what's inside this game. So, where did I start? What drew me to Through the Breach? Why even bother picking this up as a role-playing game at all? Well, for me, I actually got introduced to Through the Breach via a few friends of mine who were into the wargame itself. They know that, of course, I am very, very big on role-playing games, and I am a bit of a character myself, but I love playing character role-playing games. I love playing narrative role-playing games, and when I started looking at wargaming for the first time, they said, you need to try Through the Breach. It's got a huge, very, very complex story, and it's got characters out its ears with very, very in-depth backgrounds, and they weren't wrong. It was absolutely great. I got to know the people who were playing it, and sure enough, they weren't talking about the mechanics and the armies and how they interacted. Everyone was telling me about the characters that they were playing, the units in their armies, why they were fighting. And for me, if that's what the wargaming community was like, then the role-playing game community must be even more amazing. So that's what drove me to that, was, I guess, the relationship between the role-playing game and the actual wargame. In addition, one thing that also appeals to me is simplicity. As someone who runs so many games, I only have such limited time to explore, so, if a game is too difficult, I might put it on a shelf. The game itself was easy enough to learn, and in addition, if I learned how to do the combat system in Through the Breach, I actually was also at the same time learning how to play Malifaux 2nd Edition. The combat system was actually identical to one another, making it very easy for me to go, well, yeah, if I've got to learn the war game, I may as well also learn the role-playing game, because they're the same. Though Malifaux is now in its 3rd edition and there are some slight changes, it is still fundamentally the same, and, the lingo, the language, and how the actions play out are pretty much identical now as they were when Through the Breach first came out. So, bonus points for that. Now, the other aspect that I was really captivated by was the card mechanics. The basic foundation of the card mechanics are you have a standard deck of 54 playing cards that you could find anywhere. It has the red and black joker included, of course. You would flip a card from the top of this deck, known as the Fate deck, and you would add your skills. Once you add your skills, you then determine success and failure based on what the Fate Muster says, and that's more or less it. There's nothing complex or nothing too deep about it. The type of suit that you get might affect the flip, and if you've got advantage or disadvantage on any particular thing, you might get a flip 2, take the highest, or flip 2, take the lowest. Beyond that, it's pretty easy, pretty simple to kind of understand. But the coolest bit about it was that as a player, you have what's called the Hand of Fate, a series of cards drawn from your Twist deck, which is kind of like a little private player deck, and you use it to replace cards drawn from the Fate deck. Meaning that I kind of felt like when I was playing that I was sitting at a game of Texas Hold'em, all the other players with their cards in their hands, waiting to draw the right card, and then throwing things down. It felt great. It felt awesome. And even just the base mechanics helped immerse me into that world. So yeah, I was very captivated by it. Once I got into it, of course, the next thing I looked at was how easy was it for me to find people to play? How easy was it for me to find games? And well, being frank, I think Through the Breach is a very underrated game. I think very few people know about it and don't know how to play. There are groups, community groups like Facebook and Discord, and on Twitch there are some people doing streams that know how to play the game and enjoy it as well. They are hard to find. It does make it very difficult to reach out, but it is growing and there are more and more people showing up. So, that was my first, kind of like, oh no, I can't find much information about it. There's no SRD online, so I can't just look up a big catalog of what I can play and how I can run things. So that was a little bit, daunting at first. But the advantage is once I picked up a core rulebook and just started going through it myself, the actual rules themselves were very simple to learn. As a player, the first thing I always do is I build a few characters just to kind of get a feel for it. And the character building is pretty simple. In the book, there's 50 pages on history and lore and the world of Malifaux, which is great because it helps inspire your characters. The other good thing is because it's an alternate Earth, we kind of understand and relate a lot of the cultures that are there. Australians, Americans, Europeans, Africans, etc. You can find a whole bunch of different inspirations in that first few chapters. Then it goes into the character building, which is a step-by-step, I want to say like 11 steps to building a character, which starts with a tarot reading, flipping cards and getting allocated points, through all the way to deciding your pursuit, which is, of course, the equivalent of your class. What is your character specialized in? What unique powers and skills do they have? Probably the only complex or crunchy element to this game that I found was in spellcasting. But then again, when is it not? Spellcasting I found was very difficult, and for the most part, the way that it works is when you want to cast a spell in combat, you need to flip a card, and then you have to get a specific number between that and your skill. In addition, you also need to get a suit, which means that there is a 75% chance that you will not get the suit that you require, meaning it might be very, very hard eventually to just cast spells, at least initially. As you level up, obviously it becomes easier, but that was one of the big things that kind of yelled out to me when I was, building characters. I was like, it's really hard to cast spells out in combat. And I'm like, yeah, it's really hard to cast spells in combat. So yeah, something to look at. As a Fate Master, however, I found the rules were very, very simple. Because everything was a skill, it made things easy. And because the players were the ones who were always flipping from the deck of Fate, I didn't really need to do much apart from know the difficulty values. Which brings me to another very interesting aspect of it, and that is adaptability. As a Fate Master, we need to be able to adapt to any situation, to be able to improv, to be able to create encounters. In Through the Breach, the great thing is that you only need to know how difficult you need a challenge to be in order to ascertain how to build the encounter. Allow me to explain. Let's say that my player wants to shoot someone. They would then flip their pistols, which is their skill, and add up their value, and then get a value. A low value would be something like 3 or 5. This is like a rudimentary shot. You're hitting a non-moving stationary target, like a bottle at the, in reasonably close range. Bang, that's it. You're good. When you start getting to like 9 or 10, you're looking at a reasonably tough challenge. You're looking at 11 to 14. You're looking at a very difficult challenge. Then you're looking at closer to 20, and you're kind of like, okay, cool, this is pretty impossible. Once you have that grasp, what you can do is you can make up any kind of monster, any kind of encounter, any kind of scenario, and you can just adjust based on how difficult you want to make the challenge. So if I want to attack someone with something that is really, really strong and really, really powerful, I might set the target number to be 13. So they need to get a 13 on their defense in order to avoid getting clobbered by this thing. And sure enough, if they do, great. Because that is a difficult challenge. And if they strike me, well, because he's so big and stuff like that, let's make him easy to hit. His target number is, let's say, 9 to hit. And all of a sudden, you've built an encounter. You've built an entire monster just on the fly. You don't even need to prep just because you understand how the difficulties work. That simplicity for me as a Fate Master is invaluable. It's just one of those things that make my life easy, it makes challenges easy, and it makes writing super easy. So yeah, that was great. So we've talked about simplicity, we've talked about accessibility. Let's talk about flexibility. Flexibility for me is when a system is robust enough to be able to be used in different settings, different genres, different modes. Honestly, I think it thrives in its own world, in its, kind of setting, but it could very easily be adapted into anywhere between like the 1700s all the way through to modern day and beyond. The way the skills work and interact is very, very easy. And as I said, creating encounters is just so simple because the way that the difficulty challenges work, it would not be difficult. The struggle, I think, would come in trying to create a high fantasy adventure using these rules. I would not recommend it, though you could very easily adapt some of the skills to be able to compensate. So instead of, say, pistols and long arms and the like, you might have archery and crossbows, slings, for example, etc., etc., etc. So with a few modifications, it could be done. Meaning that it is reasonably flexible, but of course, with a little bit of TLC. Yeah. Narrative. Let's talk the narrative and the story. The story itself is really, really fun, and as I mentioned, it is very, very heavily based around the characters that you interact with. I think for me, the narrative is really born of the Wargame characters and implementing them into the game. Out of the number of times that I've had the chance to play, it's always when there's a mention of one of the Wargame characters, of which there is so much information about, that the game really starts to shine. You know, feeling like you're less a part of the world and more a part of that particular character's story is what makes, I guess, this game really appealing. If you look behind me, we have the wanted Dr. McMorning, PhD, extremely dangerous resurrectionist, immediately reports sightings to the guild. Now, that is a loaded part of an adventure waiting to happen, inspired, of course, by one of the primary characters from the wargame. That is, for me, where the narrative thrives, is when you find that character or that story to latch onto and then expand upon. You then build it into this game, and then you build your characters getting to interact and meet even these kind of notable characters. But what does that mean if you aren't familiar with Malifaux? What if you don't know any of these characters? The great thing is, you learn about them, you get to know them, and if you're playing at a table, you're a brand new Fate Master, you've never played through the Breach, you've never played Malifaux, you're playing with a group of people who have never played or never found out about these. Well, I mean, first of all, I have no idea why you're using them to cameo, but more importantly, learning about these characters by your interactions with them is the same in any game. And the good thing is that you've actually got these great models to be able to bust out on your table and go, boom, there's McMorning right there in front of you. And if you are, of course, into the wargame, you might even have terrain to build your sets and stuff. As I said at the beginning of this video, the marriage between the wargame and the role-playing game is one of the biggest boons that this role-playing game has. What about appearance? How does the appearance and layout work? Well, I think the appearance of this book is very, very pretty. The artwork is amazing, and the layout is simple enough that it's easy to follow. While there is, of course, a large thickness to the book, a lot of it is about the lore and about building that kind of stuff. The actual rules themselves are actually not too big, and the options that are available to every character is pretty decent. It also includes the monster manual, or the bestiary as it is, filled with a bunch of different pre-generated encounters, and it also includes a tiny adventure at the end of the book as well, which is Bad Things Happen. It's kind of like this adventure set on a train as people are heading into Malifaux for the first time. It's great. It is literally an introduction to the world in the form of a small one shot. So as far as appearance goes, it's incredible. Oh, also, and I'm going to mention this, I cannot describe the book better than luxurious when it comes to just how it feels. If you feel it, the embossing on it, the actual cover on it, like there is just something magical happening there. And if you get a copy of the book, you'll know what I mean. It's great. The last topic I want to talk about is the lifespan. How long does a campaign run? Is it something that you should do regularly? What's the go? Through the Breach and its pre-generated models, otherwise known as Penny Dreadfuls, thrive in short-term campaigns. Let me explain. the way that this game works is every single session, the Fate Master will give you a synopsis of what's going to happen that day. This could be you are going to go rob a train, at which point the players will decide what pursuit they want to pursue during the course of that game. Every pursuit has a rank 0 ability, so if you take something new, you will get something immediately to help you. But then at the end of the campaign, or the end of the game, should I say, the session, not even the game, the end of the session, you will gain 1 rank in that pursuit. And the good thing about that is you'll actually end up with a pretty high-leveled character pretty quickly if you do long-term campaigns. So short-term campaigns work because you can duck a person into a scenario, pull them out, and then do a different scenario, and then maybe use a different character, then pull them out, and then a different scenario, and then you have that old character come back. The cool thing is because of these short-formed adventures, the actual mix and match capabilities of what you can do as a player is phenomenal. And I think that's probably one of the most fun things about it, is that you can come to a session with one character, and then as long as you're not kind of bleeding from one session to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, you can just make another character and then come in with that one. The best kind of sessions, I'd say, are between 1 to 14 games, which also works well for scheduling. If you, like me, are an adult with commitments and the like, it's very hard to find several years' worth of Saturdays to put together for super long-term campaigns. But with you leveling up at the end of every single game with short-formed, simple stories, yeah, you could put aside, 2 to 6 weeks and say, yeah, let's play a small scenario here. More importantly, it's also great because you can pick it up at any point in time and run a quick session, because a deck of playing cards is not hard to find, and there are a ton of fated pre-generated characters available online for people to be able to create their own characters or just use straight on the fly. So yeah, lifespan-wise, very short, but very reusable and very replayable. Absolutely. I can't even tell you how many adventures there are currently available as kind of modules, but so many that I would say that you could easily compete with the number of campaigns that you would play in any other system. It could take you years to get through them just via that. One of my favorite ones is called the Obsidian Gate, and I think I ran that one for 8 to 10 weeks-ish before I got to the end. And it takes place in Japan, which was very cool. So yeah, very, very awesome. Now, where is this review leading? Well, what kind of review doesn't have numerical point values in order to ascertain whether or not I liked things or not? So without any further ado, boop, let's do numerics, because that makes us feel safe. Let's start with simplicity. How simple was the game? How easy was it to understand? Simplicity gets a solid 4, in my opinion, because not only was the layout of the core rulebook easy enough to follow, and the rules, of course, integrated into Through the Breach were the same as Malifaux, but I have actually run the game a few times, and I have even managed to teach how to play the game during a game without hiccups, without stopping. And we're not talking about like full 4, 5, 6 hour games. We're talking like 2-hour sessions where I've been able to keep people abreast of what's happening and how to play on the fly without any difficulties. So yeah, simplicity, this gets a solid 4 out of 5. No questions. Flexibility. Now, flexibility is a 3.5, and the reason being is that while it thrives in a, kind of modern, industrialized, or even futuristic kind of setting, it does limit itself by how much is available towards other genres. Like, you couldn't really see yourself doing, kind of like a high fantasy Lord of the Rings type game with this sort of adventure. But you could see Call of Cthulhu, for example. So it is versatile. There is definitely some use, across things that aren't necessarily this specific setting, but it would be very tricky and you would need to tweak things. Narrative. Now, the narrative is great. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Every single book that comes out deepens that narrative. It's not only the core rulebook that we look at for that, but we're looking at just how much the core rulebook hooks you in. It covers everything. It covers this 100-year war, after the remnants of Soulstones. It covers the first initial integration of magic into the world. There's just so many things to really delve into in this book. Like I said, 50 pages, and every single one of them is a goddamn ripper. So, yeah, I was very captivated by the narrative and very, very invested. And that doesn't include the other expansion books, of which there are, I want to say 5 expansion books. There is, let me go through this. There's Into the Steam, Into the Bayou, Under Quarantine, Above the Law, and From Nightmares, as of the making of this video. So, yeah, tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. Then we've got the appearance of the book and the layout, and of course how easy it is to kind of digest. Very easy to digest, with the exception of spells and skill triggers, which were a little bit difficult. The actual layout and the appearance was easy enough. I've taught several young kids, anywhere between the ages of 12 to 17, how to actually build characters and even run games, and they seem to have had no trouble at all. So this one gets a solid 4. Now, lastly, my most critical one is the lifespan. How long this actually lasts. Honestly, part of it is because it is very difficult to find games. Another part of it is because even when you find games, a lot of people tend to lean on and enjoy a lot of dice games. It makes it very difficult to kind of get these games going. But that being said, I think its replayability is infinite. There is never going to be a scenario where a person who knows how to play Through the Breach can't just bust it out and play the game. So this one is a solid 3. It is incredibly replayable, but it is very short-formed. You will not have really, really long and drawn-out campaigns or encounters with this particular system. So there you go. That is, of course, my review of the Through the Breach core rulebook. Of course, I'm happy to answer any and all questions that people might have in the chat below in more details should you have it. So please leave a comment, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and ring that bell for more notifications. We are going to be, of course, reviewing all the Through the Breach rulebooks, as well as, of course, doing a tutorial series so that you at home might be able to digest this incredibly simple book even more easily through the aid of visual means. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Until next time, guys, as always, game hard or die trying. Good night, everybody.